You're sitting at dinner with friends you've known for years. The conversation flows, but something feels off. They're complaining about the same problems they had 6 months ago. Same toxic relationship patterns. Same career frustrations. Same victim mentality wrapped in different words. And you realize with uncomfortable clarity, you've outgrown this table, not with judgment, not with superiority, just with the quiet recognition that you're no longer vibrating at the same frequency. This is the moment every woman on a genuine spiritual path faces, and it's terrifying. Because nobody warns you that growth comes with loneliness. Nobody tells you that the more you heal, the more you'll sit alone. Nobody mentions that choosing yourself means unchosen by many who claim to love you. But here's what's actually happening when your circle shrinks. You're not losing friends. You're shedding frequencies. Every person who falls away is revealing a level of consciousness you've transcended. Every relationship that dissolves is showing you an attachment that was keeping you small. Every door that closes behind you is the universe's violent mercy, pushing you toward your actual destiny instead of the comfortable mediocrity you were settling for. Most women interpret this loneliness as failure. They think something's wrong with them because they can no longer tolerate surface-level conversation. They feel guilty for wanting depth when everyone around them seems content with distraction. They question their growth because it's isolating, rather than immediately rewarding. But this interpretation is backwards. The isolation isn't punishment. It's initiation. You're not being rejected by your tribe. You're being prepared for a different one. Let me be clear about what I'm describing. This isn't about becoming arrogant or thinking you're better than anyone. This isn't about spiritual bypassing, where you use growth as an excuse to abandon people who need you. This isn't about the ego inflation that comes from collecting spiritual concepts and using them as weapons of superiority. That's not leveling up. That's lateral movement disguised as ascension. Real leveling up is recognizable by specific signs. You stop participating in gossip not because you're judging those who do, but because it literally feels like you're eating poison. You can't engage anymore. Your body rejects it. You walk away from drama not because you're above it, but because you finally felt what peace tastes like. And you're not willing to trade it for the temporary hit of being right or being included in the chaos. You release relationships not because you don't love those people, but because you love yourself more than you fear their judgment of your transformation. And here's the part that breaks most women. The people you're releasing don't understand. They can't see that you're not abandoning them. You're becoming someone who can no longer participate in the patterns that were keeping both of you stuck. They experience your growth as rejection because from their unchanged perspective, it is rejection. You're rejecting the version of yourself they needed you to be. The one who played small so they felt big. The one who stayed broken so they didn't have to face their own healing. The one who remained accessible to their chaos so they never had to develop their own peace. Paramahansa Yogananda taught that spiritual evolution is not comfortable. He said the path narrows as you ascend, not because God is exclusive, but because very few are willing to pay the price of transformation. That price is often the dismantling of your entire social structure, not because you choose it, but because frequency is fact, not feeling. You can't force resonance with people operating at consciousness levels you've transcended. You can love them. You can have compassion. But you can't pretend you still fit in spaces that have become too small for who you're becoming. I watch women try to maintain relationships that have clearly expired, and it's like watching someone try to wear clothes from childhood. You can technically force yourself into them, but you'll be uncomfortable, restricted, unable to move freely. And eventually, those clothes will tear because they were never meant to contain your adult form. Relationships are the same. Some were meant for specific chapters. Trying to drag them into new chapters doesn't honor the relationship. It deforms it. Better to release it with gratitude for what it taught you and trust that the people meant for your next level will appear when you stop clinging to the comfort of the previous one. This channel got demonetized a few weeks ago, so if this is helping you, can support this channel by visiting the links in description. Thanks. Women are conditioned to believe that loyalty means never changing, never growing beyond the people who knew them first. We're taught that evolution is betrayal, that wanting more than what satisfied us 5 years ago is greed, that needing depth when we used to be fine with shallow is being difficult. So we shrink. We perform the old version of ourselves to keep people comfortable. We hide our growth so we don't trigger their stagnation. We make ourselves small again and call it kindness when it's actually self-betrayal. Here's what nobody tells you. Making yourself small to keep others comfortable is not love. It's enabling. You're teaching them that growth is threatening. You're confirming their unconscious belief that change means loss. You're modeling that real friendship requires stagnation rather than celebrating evolution. This isn't kindness. It's a disservice to both of you because they deserve friends who inspire them to grow, and you deserve friends who celebrate your expansion rather than guilt tripping you back into limitation. The circle gets smaller because consciousness is hierarchical, not because you're becoming exclusive. There are levels. Not better or worse in moral terms, but higher and lower in vibrational frequency. Someone operating from victim consciousness cannot maintain intimate friendship with someone operating from creator consciousness. The worldviews are incompatible. The victim sees life happening to them. The creator sees life happening through them. These perspectives don't just disagree, they exist in different realities. You can have compassion across that gap. You can have periodic connection. But you cannot have the daily intimate resonance that real friendship requires. I'm not saying this to be harsh. I'm saying this because pretending otherwise keeps women trapped in relationships that drain them while telling themselves they're being loyal. You're not being loyal to a friendship that requires you to dim your light. You're being loyal to fear. Fear of loneliness. Fear of judgment. Fear of discovering that maybe you're capable of standing alone, which would mean you can no longer use "but my friends" as the excuse for not pursuing what terrifies and calls to you simultaneously. When your circle starts shrinking, you'll feel it physically before you understand it mentally. You'll notice you're exhausted after seeing certain people, not energized. You'll find yourself making excuses to avoid gatherings you used to enjoy. You'll check your phone less, respond to messages slower, feel relieved when plans get canceled. Your body is telling you what your mind doesn't want to accept. These connections are no longer feeding you. They're depleting you. Not because those people are bad, but because you've changed and the relationship contract hasn't. Every friendship has an unspoken contract. I'll be this if you'll be that. I'll play this role if you play that one. I'll validate this part of you if you validate that part of me. These contracts work beautifully until one person changes the terms by growing. Suddenly, you're not holding up your end of the bargain. You're not playing your assigned role. You're not giving them what they unconsciously signed up for, and they feel betrayed, even though what they're actually feeling is the discomfort of being confronted with their own stagnation. So they'll try to pull you back. Not maliciously, unconsciously. They'll remind you of who you used to be. They'll bring up old stories where you were messy, broken, chaotic, as if to say, remember, this is who you really are. Don't pretend you've changed. They'll minimize your growth with statements like, "You're not that different," or "You're still the same person to me," or "I liked you better before," when what they mean is, "I liked you better when I didn't have to look at my own lack of growth in contrast to yours." This is the test. Do you shrink back down to make them comfortable? Do you hide your transformation to maintain the relationship? Or do you stand in your truth and trust that anyone meant to walk with you into your next chapter will celebrate your evolution rather than resent it? Most women fail this test the first few times. They shrink. They perform the old version. They laugh at jokes that aren't funny anymore. They engage in conversations that feel empty. They pretend interest in topics that bore them now. And they do this because loneliness is terrifying, and female conditioning makes us believe that being alone means being unlovable. But here's the truth that will set you free. Being alone is temporary. Betraying yourself to avoid it is permanent. One is a season. The other is a scar. The women who make it through this initiation, who let the circle shrink without fighting it, who trust the loneliness as part of the process rather than evidence of failure, these are the women who emerge into their power, not because they're better than anyone else, but because they chose themselves when it would have been easier to choose comfort. They honored their growth when it would have been simpler to stay small. They walked through the fire of isolation rather than staying in the familiar prison of stunted relationships. And what they discover on the other side is profound. The new people who enter their life don't just tolerate their growth. They match it. They mirror it. They inspire them to go even deeper. The new friendships aren't based on shared history or social convenience. They're based on shared frequency. And frequency-based relationships have a quality that history-based relationships can never achieve. They support your expansion rather than requiring your contraction. But getting to those new relationships requires faith in the gap. There's always a gap, a period of loneliness between releasing the old circle and receiving the new one. This gap is where most women break. They rush back to old relationships out of desperation. They lower their standards to fill the void. They convince themselves they were being too picky, too judgmental, too selective. And they end up right back where they started, surrounded by people who love the version of them that no longer exists. The gap is sacred. It's not empty. It's full of the most important relationship you'll ever cultivate. The one with yourself. When you're alone, you can't hide behind the distraction of social connection. You have to face yourself completely, your thoughts, your patterns, your wounds that you've been using other people to avoid feeling. The gap forces you to develop the internal resources that no external relationship can provide. Self-trust, self-soothing, self-validation, the ability to be alone without being lonely. Yogananda spoke often about the necessity of solitude on the spiritual path. He said that God is found in the silence between your thoughts, not in the noise of constant connection. Most people fill every moment with social interaction because they're terrified of what they'll discover in silence. They'll discover they don't actually like themselves very much. They'll discover their life looks nothing like what they claim to want. They'll discover they've been performing for approval rather than living from authenticity. These discoveries are uncomfortable, so they avoid the silence. They keep the circle full even when it's draining them. The chosen woman doesn't avoid the silence. She runs toward it. Not because she's antisocial, but because she's discovered that the depth she's craving cannot be found in surface-level connection. She'd rather sit in solitude with her own soul than in a room full of people with whom she has to perform. She's tasted what it feels like to be truly seen, and she knows she cannot be seen by people operating from the level of consciousness she's transcended. So she waits. in the gap, in the silence, developing herself, deepening herself, becoming so solid in her own frequency that when the right people appear, there's no question. The resonance is immediate and unmistakable. This doesn't mean she's passive. She's not sitting in her house waiting for soulmate friendships to knock on her door. She's out in the world, but differently. She's selective about where she directs her energy. She's intentional about the spaces she enters. She's not trying to fit in everywhere. She's looking for the specific environments where her frequency is already welcome. The yoga class where everyone's doing the inner work. The mastermind where women are building empires. The spiritual community where depth is the norm, not the exception. She's placing herself in the path of people who are already where she's going, not staying loyal to people stuck where she's been. And she's learning to recognize her people by different markers, not by how long she's known them, not by shared history or social proximity, but by how she feels after spending time with them. Does she feel expanded or contracted, energized or depleted, inspired or drained, seen or performing? These felt senses are more accurate than any mental checklist of friendship qualities. Your body knows who's in your frequency before your mind can rationalize it. The shrinking circle reveals something else most women miss. You were trying to get needs met by people who were never meant to meet them. You wanted your party friends to give you depth. You wanted your work friends to give you spiritual connection. You wanted your family to validate your transformation when they're invested in you staying the same, because your change threatens their comfort. You were asking the wrong people for the right things, then feeling disappointed when they couldn't deliver. But they were never supposed to deliver. They were in your life for different purposes, and holding them responsible for needs they're not equipped to meet is unfair to everyone. Different people serve different purposes. Some are meant to make you laugh. Some are meant to challenge you professionally. Some are meant to hold space for your spiritual expansion. Some are meant to be there for a season, teaching you specific lessons. Some are meant for a lifetime, evolving alongside you. The problem isn't that your circle is shrinking. The problem is you thought everyone in your circle was supposed to be everything, when the truth is most people are supposed to be something specific for a specific time. When you release the expectation that every person should meet every need, the shrinking circle becomes less painful and more logical. Of course, your party friends from your 20s aren't showing up for your spiritual awakening in your 30s. That was never their role. Of course, your work friends aren't interested in deep philosophical conversations. That's not what you bonded over. Of course, your family doesn't understand your transformation. They're still seeing you through the lens of who you were, not who you're becoming. None of this is personal. It's just mismatched expectations meeting reality. But here's where it gets interesting. As your circle shrinks, as you release relationships that no longer fit, you're creating space for something the universe couldn't deliver while you were still clutching the old connections. You're creating vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. The space you create by releasing what's no longer aligned becomes the invitation for what is aligned. But you have to release first. You can't receive the new while gripping the old. The universe doesn't deliver your next level people while you're still trying to force fit your previous level people into roles they were never meant to play. This is why the shrinking circle is actually expansion. You're expanding your capacity to be alone, expanding your standards for intimate connection, expanding your willingness to wait for quality over settling for availability, expanding your trust that the right people exist, even if you haven't met them yet. All of this is growth, even though it feels like loss. You're not losing. You're refining. Like gold being purified in fire, you're burning away the dross to reveal what's actually valuable. The women who resist this process, who keep trying to maintain every relationship from every chapter, who refuse to let anyone fall away. They end up exhausted, resentful, and wondering why they feel so alone despite being surrounded by people. They're alone because none of those people actually see them. They see the version they want her to be, the version they're comfortable with, the version that doesn't challenge them. Being surrounded by people who don't see you is lonelier than being physically alone, because at least when you're alone, you can stop performing, and the performance is killing you. Pretending to be less aware than you are, dumbing down your insights so you don't make others uncomfortable, laughing at things that aren't funny, acting interested in topics that bore you, hiding your practices because they're too weird for normal people, downplaying your growth because someone might feel judged by comparison. This constant self-editing is exhausting, and it's creating an internal split where the real you and the performed you are becoming further apart. Eventually, this split will demand resolution. Either you integrate by being yourself fully, or you fracture by maintaining the performance until you forget which version is real. The chosen woman chooses integration. She'd rather be alone as herself than surrounded by people as a performance. This choice is terrifying initially, but it's the only choice that leads to freedom. Freedom to be exactly who you are. Freedom to speak your truth without self-censoring. Freedom to pursue your path without having to justify it to people who will never understand. This freedom is what you're actually craving when you feel the pull to let the circle shrink. You're not being antisocial. You're being protective of the self you've worked so hard to become. I've watched women fight this process for years. They keep showing up to friendships that feel obligatory. They keep attending events that drain them. They keep engaging in group chats that trigger them. And they do all of this because they're more afraid of being alone than they are committed to being authentic. But eventually, the pain of performing exceeds the fear of loneliness. And that's when the shift happens. They stop fighting the shrinking circle. They stop trying to maintain connections that require constant self-abandonment, and they discover that loneliness was never the thing they feared. What they feared was discovering they're capable of standing alone, because that would mean they could no longer use lack of support as the reason for not pursuing their calling. The shrinking circle removes that excuse. When you're alone, you can't blame anyone for your lack of progress. You can't point to unsupportive friends as the reason you didn't write the book, start the business, make the move, take the risk. You're forced to confront the truth that you're the only thing standing between you and your destiny. And for most women, this truth is more terrifying than loneliness. Because as long as you have a full circle demanding your time and energy, you have a built-in excuse for not becoming who you're meant to be. The shrinking circle removes the excuse. Now what? Now you become. You finally have the time, space, and energy to pursue what's actually calling you. The book you've been saying you'll write for 5 years. The business you've been planning but never starting. The healing modality you've been studying but not practicing. The move to the city that terrifies and excites you. The relationship standards you've been too afraid to enforce. All of it becomes possible when you stop spending your resources maintaining relationships that were keeping you exactly where you've been. This is why the universe shrinks your circle, not as punishment, but as preparation. You cannot step into your next level dragging your entire past with you. Some people are meant to stay in previous chapters. Trying to bring them forward is like trying to bring your elementary school friends into your doctoral program. They don't fit. Not because they're wrong or bad, but because they're not meant for this chapter. Releasing them with love is the only way to honor what they taught you while making space for what's next. But you have to release them fully. Not this half in, half out thing where you keep them around out of guilt while resenting the energy it costs. Not the slow fade where you're hoping they'll get the hint and release you first, so you don't have to feel like the bad guy. Honest, clean release. I love you. I'm grateful for what we shared, and I'm moving in a direction that we can no longer walk together. It's not about better or worse. It's about different. And different is okay. Most women never have this conversation. They just drift. They ghost slowly. They make excuses until the other person stops reaching out. And this slow fade is harder than a clean break because it keeps you energetically tethered. Every ignored message is a little guilt. Every canceled plan is a little shame. Every avoided interaction is a little resentment. This low-grade emotional drainage continues for months or years when a single honest conversation could have completed the cycle with respect and clarity. The chosen woman has the hard conversations. She doesn't ghost. She doesn't fade. She doesn't wait for the other person to end it. She names what's true. I've changed. We're no longer aligned. I honor what we had, and I release what we can't continue. This directness feels cruel to people who prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truth, but it's actually the kindest thing you can do. Clarity is a gift. Clean endings allow both people to move forward without the energetic drag of unfinished business, and then you sit in the space you've created. The quiet, the freedom, the terrifying, wide-open possibility of a life that's no longer defined by who others expect you to be. This space is where you meet yourself, not the performed self, not the people-pleasing self, not the self that contorts to fit into spaces too small, the actual self, the one that's been waiting for you to clear enough space to fully inhabit your own life. She's been here the whole time, waiting. While you were busy maintaining relationships that required you to be someone else, while you were attending events that drained you, while you were performing for approval from people whose approval was never going to satisfy the hunger in your soul, she was waiting. And now, in the silence of your shrinking circle, you finally have the space to hear her, to know her, to become her fully. This is the gift of the shrinking circle, not loneliness, liberation, not rejection, selection, not loss. Refinement. You're not losing your tribe. You're discovering that your real tribe was never going to be found in spaces that require you to be smaller than you are. Your real tribe is in rooms you haven't entered yet, having conversations you're finally ready for, operating at the frequency you've worked so hard to achieve. But you can only meet them after you've released the illusion that your previous level people can become your next level people through sheer force of will and history. Some relationships are lifetime. Most are seasonal. And the chosen woman knows the difference. She doesn't cling to seasonal relationships, demanding they become lifetime. She honors the season, extracts the lesson, feels the gratitude, and releases what's complete. This capacity to release is what allows her to receive. You cannot catch new rain with full hands. You must empty the cup to fill it again. Your shrinking circle is the emptying. Trust that the refilling is already in motion.